Good morning, everyone. Let me thank all of you for coming out on this rainy morning. I'm not sure whether the gods conspired this morning to let us know that the background against which we're taking this action is because there's a lot of clouds above us. But like with everything else in life, I think we know how to overcome them. This is not a morning for a lot of long speeches. I'll say something at the very end, but I don't know whether the head of the private sector, I'm sorry that Mr. Branco, because of his religious commitments, as well as Minister Colin Jordan, both of whom share the same faith, are not with us physically, but I know that they're with us in spirit, and we thank them for the tremendous work that they would have done this week in helping us to get to this stage. And before we sign, I want to thank each and every one of you who is here. As I keep saying, I'm proud to be a Barbadian. And I'm proud that we come from a country where we understand that all of us have to carry the weight together. You hear me use a lot of Barbadian adages all the time. And it's not because I don't have vocabulary, but those old sayings survive the times because they work and they resonate with people. And in this instance, many hands make light work, and a little with content is great gain, are the two things that have guided us in coming to this point. Just in the same way that they guided those who, in their wisdom, brought us together initially in the social partnership just over 30 years ago. So, Mrs. Dennis.
Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister. I just a few very, very brief comments before we get into the thrust of why we are here. Whilst we're formalizing the social compact this morning in a way that I think is significant for our country, we just want to remind, the country that this is not something that is necessarily strange to the governing of the tripartite body, and certainly we have been exercising that social compact consistently. Of note, essentially, it was what we had to do during the pandemic. It wasn't formalized, but of a similar nature. Minister Simmons certainly would remember coming to the private sector during the pandemic and expressing his concerns. And the response was swift and decisive. I believe, I'm looking at Andrew, by now, remember, we actually went to the extent of actually publishing a commitment in the press with the signatures of the same parties that are represented by this compact today, assuring the public that there would be no encouragement of any malfeasance on behalf of the private sector, and that we were very much committed to ensuring that the prices, as much as we had the control over those, would remain at their lowest level. So this is not something that is necessarily novel to us, but we do have to have the formalities, every now and then. I'm very proud, though, having said that generally speaking, in spite of the concerns about pricing and the potential for exploiting the situation as relates to price gouging, that to the best of our knowledge, at least, there have been no reports of such, and therefore the credibility of the private sector to sign this compact this morning stands steady. And I use my words very carefully in terms of what has been reported to us. And that's very critical, because when we sign a social compact, we are essentially agreeing to abide by a set of voluntary principles of compliance. And the issue of our credibility as a private sector to come here is something that we need to essentially reinforce, because we have a proven track record of doing what we say and have said that we would do. And it's important, I think, for the country to be assured that this is not just a piece of paper that we're signing, but that it is consistent with the ethos and the spirit of what the private sector has proven that it is capable and willing to do in the past. The compact, I must also emphasize, is being signed on the majority of the price influencers in the country. I think that's very important. We do not, obviously, and cannot control every retailer on the island, but we are satisfied that we are representing, I think, circa 70% of the market share, and therefore the main and primary influencers of pricing. This compact is being signed on the behalf of those entities. That is very important for the public to keep in mind, because it's not just the large players in the large supermarkets that are going to be selling the items that are appended to the compact, the 47 items, but we certainly would not be able to control the informal sector, every mini mart and every shop and so on, and therefore the public needs to be made aware of that context. But again, those are the entities that do not tend to influence the prices in the country, and therefore, I think for the majority of what the public is going to consume, 70% of the market share, we are very confident that we're going to be seeing significant reductions in the not too distant future. I believe the BCCI president has indicated that he expects that that's going to come into play as soon as by the end of this week at the latest. I obviously have to emphasize that the Prime Minister, in her statement on Friday, she would have outlined certain prices, some have been on an average basis, and we are going into this as is basis, assuming that all things remain equal. And the Prime Minister obviously, in her budgetary proposals, a lot of what she brought to the public in terms of relief, particularly as it relates to fuel, for example, was predicated on a price of US $80 per barrel. And before the ink was dry on the budgetary proposals, that started to climb to the extent that the relief that was brought about by the government is almost not discernible because the prices of the fuel escalated so high. We need to therefore keep our eye on the international price trends over the next 6 months. And we have to, I believe, Prime Minister, be very transparent and proactive in our communication to the government and to the Ministry of Commerce, where we begin to see any fluctuations upward from the prices as they stand, so that everyone understands essentially what's happening, with the agreed basket of items. And that's really my brief comments this morning. I'm very encouraged by the presence of the labor movement here as well, as witnesses to this compact. I would only echo essentially our previous comments, therefore, for some level of restraint in terms of the expectations of wage adjustments for the entities that are party to this compact, because they're making a tremendous sacrifice, certainly over the next 6 months. And therefore, we would really love for our labor colleagues, having witnessed what we're doing here, to bear that in mind as they enter into any negotiations over the next 6 months with the entities that are the primary partners to this compact. So those few words, Prime Minister, I will rest my comments here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make these comments in this submission, and I look forward to signing this compact with you.
Thank you very much. And I will only say that I've gotten so accustomed to the voices of everyone else. And while I'd like to hear everybody this morning, I think we all want to get out of here in good time as well. But I want to use this opportunity truly to thank, as I said, the other persons, Mr. Tomlinson Bino is here, Mr. MacArthur Barrow is here, the General Manager of the Chamber of Commerce, Lowen, is here. I explained to Mr. Branca's absence. And then I really want to thank the farmers, because we are in the process of meeting and working. This is but one part of the work that we're doing together, and I look forward to continuing the work with you, because I believe that we can see significant expansion in agricultural production in this country, not just for domestic purposes, but also through agro-processing and for export purposes. So thank you very much. I'd like to ask the members of the labor movement, may I say that I also want to give apologies on behalf of the president of the NUPW, who at the last minute couldn't make it because of personal circumstances. and Setu Sab regretted to the senior minister last night that they were not in a position to make it at this late stage. But nevertheless, we will send the compact to them for their signatures thereafter. I'd like to invite, I'm not sure, the General Secretary of the Barbados Workers Union, and to welcome also the President of the BSTU, who is with us this morning.
Thank you, and good morning to everybody. Good morning to members of the media, especially. This morning, on behalf of Labour, I have the proud opportunity to speak, and I speak against a backdrop of certain measure of pride. Our history of social partnership in this country, a history that is almost 3 decades long, is one that has shown us that the value of partnership is most often seen in times of hardship, in times when all of us at different levels feel as if our physical backs are being pushed against a wall, and our institutional backs as well. I'm sure that members of the private sector share the similar views of members in labor at the institutional level, that these are indeed some very difficult times through which we must maneuver, through which we must navigate as leaders in the country. And I'm happy this morning that although we've heard the comments, as you would hear comments, that there are views out there that there is more that could be done, ought to be done, I think that is a certain measure of satisfaction that all of us can feel that enough has been done so far to cushion the reality that confronts the most vulnerable among us. The basket of goods or the changes that you have heard a few days ago, a couple days ago, are changes that also started at the level of the social partnership. Last Friday when we met, the social partnership through representatives of government, labor, and the private sector started the process of examining what those goods could look like, and I'm glad that we could be involved at every stage. I do hear my private sector counterpart raise the issue of the responsibility of labor during these times. And I think that that responsibility has been shown, and I would be surprised if it is still not unquestioned. For about 15 years, labor in the public sector has seen increases of only 5%. Labor has been holding strain there. More recently, during this crisis, we've continued, my union, which has responsibility for many companies in the private sector, we've continued to negotiate as we have negotiated over the 80 years of our existence. And that is on a case-by-case basis, so that we are seeing increases. I had an officer 2 months ago settled with a group for 8% increase. And some people might say, wow, but there's context behind negotiations, and context continues to govern the Executive Council of the Barbados Workers Union as we navigate through these times to bring the best that we can within context for our members. Similarly, we've had situations where there have been moratoria over a period of time. So this short-term measure, 6 months, and maybe even, I can venture to say initially, because God knows what else we may be called to do as a social partnership body. But this short-term measure represents yet another demonstration of the willingness of the social partnership through its representatives to demonstrate and commit to the people of Barbados that we will do whatever we can find possible to do during these times to help our neighbor and help our, and what we will say proverbially in biblical terms, to be our brother's keeper. So labor commits to doing what it can as it seeks to balance that against the greater good. In this fight, it is, as we've heard the Prime Minister say 2 days ago, the many for the many, and not a few, or the many for a few. So that is the kind of commitment that we will continue to uphold. Sister Redmond, have I represented you faithfully?
Most definitely.
Thank you.
I think at this stage, I'll invite everyone, we'll sign, and then what we'll do, I'll give some wrap-up comments, also speaking to some of the context of what we're facing. Thank you. Today is what date? 16th? Pass this to you. Oh, I really want to thank everyone, as I said. Um, Tomorrow we will run a sample ad and we'll distribute by social media, run an ad, sorry, with sample goods, and we'll distribute on social media. But when we have done what we have looked at with the average retail pricing in this truly is amazing. And remember, as I said, government took off VAT on a number of items as well, and on the citrus items, we've removed duty. And the items which we've taken off VAT, sliced ham, cream of wheat, corn flakes, chocolate for drinking, inclusive of Milo, black tea, honey, apples, peanut butter, and the duty waivers on oranges, grapefruits, lemons, and lime. I must say to Bajans that those who don't know, grapefruit was first founded in Barbados as a cross between orange and shaddock, and it is one of my great things, great regrets, that we do not have more grapefruit trees growing in this country since grapefruit was first discovered here. But that's an aside. Let us look very quickly, for your benefit, at some of the things that are truly significant. I want to salute the poultry sector. The poultry sector is making this commitment, and the pork sector are making this commitment at a time when they have seen prices increase for feed. The government of Barbados has subsidized feed to the tune of $4 million already in the last 6 months, and the feed factory has already seen and made its own adjustments in the last 2 months, as the senior minister advised me, and as I spoke to 2 days ago. And the reality is that we do see some decline in grain in corn prices, but we hope that that will continue, and once it does, there's normally a lag between when we can get the benefit of that decline in prices on the world market. With respect, however, to, or in spite of all of that, we are seeing on average an 18 to 24% decline in the price of key parts of chicken, whole chicken, chicken chop mix, stew chicken, and chicken backs. We've not done everything because we expect that they still have to live. And therefore, if people want the specialized breasts or legs and thighs or the nuggets, that's not on the table. But a whole chicken will go, the average whole chicken price will go from about 1.5 kilograms, $25 to about $19 and change when you look at these prices here. Similarly, if we look at the whole price of corn flakes, and we know how much corn flakes children can consume. Corn flakes moves from $15.95 to $11.55. We have also major savings across things like Klim, $16.85 to $10.59. Huggies, $67.55 to $58.50. And I can go on, but the bottom line is that these sample goods here, when taken, come to a total of $653.39 before these discounts have been applied, and after the discounts, $524.06, a savings of 20%, which therefore is real, is credible, and is one that really caused me to salute the private sector for leading the effort of allowing us to overcome. We have only just started, and everyone is going to be required to play their role to get through these difficult times. I think that we've said enough to let you know, and I keep using the analogy of rough seas because it's part of our Barbadian lingo with the landship, that with rough seas, you may not do fancy strokes, but the key is to keep your head above water and to tread if you have to dog paddle if you have to, because a time will come when you will be able to do the fancy strokes again. Those who like cricket will tell you that if you got a fast bowler who really bowling well, you just got to see him off. He can't bowl all day. Hard times ain't going to be all the time. So let us work together, hold each other up, and see off this. I anticipate, and you heard the General Secretary of the Workers' Union indicate that perspective and context is relevant for them. But what we all agree is that moderation also is relevant for everybody, and everybody is agreeing to leave something on the table. But it isn't only labor that we're talking to now. I want to talk to every Barbadian. Over the course of the last 2.5, 3 years, we introduced, for example, a bond called the Boss Bond. You remember that? And it was directed primarily at the public sector. in order for us to continue to play the role that we are playing as a government. And let's be very clear, the government has had to carry the burden of adjustment since the beginning of COVID, and understandably so, because if the private sector has no revenue coming in the tourism sector, then the implications of that for the farmers, as we saw with the pork industry in particular, the implications of that for the distributors and the retailers, the implications of that for the people who drive trucks, the implications of that for labor were very, very clear. We have a situation where we have excess liquidity in this country, serious excess liquidity. And we leave that money in the bank and making cash effectively irrelevant. Because if it is getting 0.01%, it is being outstripped by inflation many times. We have, as a government, if we're going to carry the load that we're carrying, we have not stopped free education. We have expanded our spend in public health and health care. We have continued our infrastructure works. We've done all of the things that you expect us to do. But we also need Barbadians now to step up to the plate and to help finance their own country. When we introduced the BOSS bonds, we made it very clear that they would not be subject to any form of restructuring. And indeed, we did exceptionally well with the BOSS bonds. After consideration, we have now agreed that we will launch in the next few weeks again BOSS Plus. The difference is that BOSS Plus this time will not just be the public sector, but will be all Barbadians or all people living in this country, all institutions operating in this country. And the truth is that we feel that in the absence of the government does not regularly issue treasury bills or treasury bonds anymore recently, in the absence of aggressive capital market, that we need to also not only help finance government's operations, but to give you better options for your future as to what you can get as returns, so that you get two for the price of one. You get a better rate of return, and you also get the opportunity of stabilizing the conditions in your country. And you know, I can talk straight all the time. Government's financing of its own program, especially at this time, irrespective of what we do with the international financial institutions, is contingent, as we said with the BOSS program, on people stepping up to the plate and helping to carry their own country. So that the BOSS Plus program will be launched, and we hope that this will become a regular feature of government financing in this country. We've tried to do all of the things to put us in a strong fiscally stable position. You have the imprimatur of independent entities, not just the Birth Monitoring Committee, but you have the imprimatur of the IMF, which, as you know, has basically said that we've continued to do all of the right things. And you've also had the judgment of the international financial and credit rating agencies, who have, in every instance, since this government has come to power, we have seen an improvement in our credit rating from what we inherited. But in addition to that, we continue, even in these difficult times, to have them reflect on Barbados with a stable outlook as opposed to a negative outlook, which has been the judgment that they've passed on many other countries. So if ever there was a time for Barbadians to step up to the plate, the private sector has led the way today by coming forward and showing that they are prepared to leave something on the table. I have no doubt that the labor movement, as they have always done over the course of our history of 80 years, has always played its part in this country. And that does not mean, as I said, that we're not going to review allowances or review things where we know that there's a distinct injustice. But similarly now, I need the average Barbadian household to play their part. And whether it is $20 or $50 or $200 or $500 or $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000, Mr. Annis, a month, whatever it is, I meant companies as well, or more. We believe that now is the time for us to understand that we are all in this together. There is no doubt that the world in which we live is an exceptionally difficult world. We've seen only this morning President Biden meet with the Gulf states in the Middle East. And what is the ultimate objective? The price of fuel in the world is really killing all of us. By the same token, the logistics disruption hasn't only come from the war in Ukraine, it was there from COVID. It was there from the ships not being able to move once China decided that it was going to lock down in order to get a zero COVID policy. So we have to appreciate that we have to get accustomed to these new times. And I have every confidence that we can. Just as I did through COVID, I'm going to talk with us straight, because at this stage, I believe that Barbadians need to be given the opportunity to be able to understand where we are and what it takes to get out of this position. The most important thing is in the development of a plan that we are creating opportunities for wealth as well. And that's why the government's policy on renewable energy is so critical, because it targets from the smallest householder right back up to the largest of companies, local and multinational, operating in this country, because there's more than enough space for everybody to benefit. But unlike most countries that just focus on the corporate end, we have decided that the patrimony of this country, the wind, the sun, the ocean, that's the patrimony of this country. And therefore, all Barbadian homeowners should be able to benefit from their roofs. But secondly, all Barbadians, because separate from the bonds that I'm talking about as boss bonds, we're going to also make sure that in the market, public and private sector, that there'll be opportunities for returns. For example, battery storage is going to need a lot of financing. You're going to need to be able to put green bonds on the market so that fellas can decide, not going to take all the money out of the bank, but you take a third or a quarter and you decide, look, I'm going to put some in green bonds, I'm going to put some in boss bonds, I'm going to get a 4% here, a 5% here, a 3% here, whatever it is. But what it is that you're managing your money better to get more long-term returns. And that's why Minister Simmons, Senior Minister, has also been tasked with the responsibility of ensuring that the financial literacy program is put out there. Bajans must become accustomed with the notion of wealth creation. And wealth only comes when it moves from generation to generation. Okay? If we keep it all in one generation, you got cash. But when we start to talk about wealth, and I'm happy to see that in the private sector, and this is critical, that there are a number of intergenerational movements taking place. Mr. Bino and Mr. Jordan. Like, where Mr. Jordan is? I can't see us, Stipple. Right. But the point is that that's critical, because these companies and corporate entities become more stable. Mr. De Freitas, same with you. These corporate entities become more stable if we can have the intergenerational play also at risk, at thing. And then I also want to thank those public companies, because I'm aware and I'm conscious that what you are doing is also a reflection of your commitment to the country, while at the same time you have commitment to your public shareholders. So believe you me, the government has reached this point, very sensitive to all of the considerations. But I say, simply to end, together we shall overcome. Now is a time to build. The Bible tells you about a time to plant, a time to sow, a time to reap. Now is our time to build again as a nation. And if we can do that, in spite of those rough seas, in spite of those dark clouds, then I know we shall get through it. But it requires honesty and clarity and commitment and focus on the part of all of us, and above all else, discipline. So let us go forward together, and let us as a nation confront these difficult times, conscious that with the phrase that I use all the time as our principle and guiding principle, that we shall share the burden, but we shall also share the bounty. And if we can live truthfully to that, then I believe we can get the majority of our people on this train with us to do what has to be done. Thank you very much.